He stares outside the observation deck of Kepler 442 monitoring station, looked the same as they had for the past 18 months. Communications officer Lee Min-ho adjusted his headset and prepared for another routine shift, scanning the deep space frequencies. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he barely noticed as he fine-tuned the receivers that listened to the endless void between stars. At 0347 station time, something changed. A faint signal appeared on his screen, barely distinguishable from cosmic background radiation. Min-ho frowned and increased the gain, watching as the weak transmission strengthened. The pattern was wrong somehow, too structured to be natural interference, yet coming from a region of space where nothing should exist. The Veil Nebula stretched across his display like a purple wound in space. No human ships traveled there. No colonies existed in that direction. The nebula itself was considered impassable, filled with gravitational anomalies and radiation storms that could tear apart even the most advanced vessels. Yet the signal continued to pulse from somewhere deep within that cosmic graveyard. Min-ho called Dr. Park Ji-woo from her quarters. The station's lead xenolinguist arrived, still wearing her sleep clothes, her hair disheveled from interrupted rest. She took one look at the signal pattern and her expression changed from annoyance to fascination. "This is not random," she whispered, her fingers dancing across the analysis console. "Look at these intervals. These repetitions. Someone is trying to communicate." For 3 days, Dr. Park worked without stopping. She consumed nothing but coffee and determination, her eyes growing red from staring at scrolling data streams. The signal was definitely artificial, but its origin remained a mystery. The mathematics were human. She was certain of that. But the message came from coordinates that placed it 200 light-years beyond the furthest human outpost. On the third night, exhaustion finally forced her to take a break. She stumbled to the station's small observation lounge and stared out at the stars, her mind still processing patterns and frequencies. Something clicked in her tired brain. She rushed back to her workstation and began a new approach to the decoding algorithm. The breakthrough came at dawn. Dr. Park's hands trembled as she watched the translation appear on her screen. The message was unmistakably human in origin, structured in the mathematical language that Earth's first interstellar expeditions had developed for deep space communication. But it was not the words that made her blood run cold. It was what those words revealed. "Don't come here. They are waiting. We were wrong about this place. The coordinates follow. Save yourselves. Tell Earth we tried to warn them. Don't make our mistake. Don't come here." The warning repeated in 17 different Earth languages, from English and Mandarin to languages that had been considered dead for centuries. Whoever sent this message had wanted to ensure it could be understood by any human who might receive it. The timestamp embedded in the signal structure indicated a transmission date of nearly 200 years in the past. Admiral Kim Tae-ho received the report while reviewing supply manifest in his office aboard the orbital command station. A career military officer with silver hair and tired eyes, he had overseen humanity's expansion into this sector for the past decade. The message that Dr. Park forwarded to him made him forget about fuel allocations and crew rotations entirely. He read the decoded transmission 3 times before calling an emergency meeting with his senior staff. The implications were staggering. If the timestamp was accurate, this signal had been sent before humanity had successfully established its first permanent interstellar colonies. The early expeditions of that era had been desperate affairs, launched with primitive technology and slim chances of survival. Most had simply vanished into the dark between stars. The coordinates provided in the message pointed to a system deep within the Veil Nebula. According to their star charts, the region contained several potentially habitable worlds, but the nebula's dangers had kept exploration teams away. If humans had somehow reached that distant place 2 centuries ago, their survival would be miraculous. Admiral Kim studied the tactical displays in his ready room, considering the options. The warning was explicit and desperate, yet the possibility of finding survivors from one of humanity's lost expeditions could not be ignored. Such a discovery would be the greatest achievement in the history of human space exploration. More troubling were the implications of the message itself. What had the original expedition found that warranted such a desperate warning? What was waiting in that distant system that could threaten ships that had not yet arrived? The questions multiplied with each passing hour. Within a week, Admiral Kim had assembled his response. The expedition fleet would consist of the heavy cruiser Determination, commanded by Captain Yoon Ji-hee, along with 3 escort vessels and the finest crew he could muster. They would carry the best scientists, the most advanced equipment, and enough firepower to handle whatever threats they might encounter. Dr. Park Ji-woo volunteered to join the expedition despite the obvious dangers. The mystery of the signal consumed her thoughts, and she felt responsible for seeing the investigation through to its conclusion. As the fleet prepared for departure, she continued analyzing the transmission, searching for additional clues hidden within its structure. The last thing Admiral Kim did before authorizing the mission was to record his own message. If the expedition failed to return, future generations would at least know why they had chosen to ignore a 200-year-old warning and venture into the darkness of the Veil Nebula. The massive engines of the Determination roared to life as Captain Yoon Ji-hee gave the order to enter the Veil Nebula. Behind her flagship, 3 smaller escort ships followed in tight formation. The purple and gold clouds of the nebula stretched endlessly in all directions, beautiful and deadly at the same time. Navigation Officer Choi Dong-wook had been studying star charts for 20 years, but nothing had prepared him for what he saw on his instruments as they pushed deeper into the nebula. The readings made no sense. Gravity wells appeared and disappeared without warning. Stars that should have been millions of miles away registered as being directly ahead of them, only to vanish when they changed course to investigate. "Captain, the navigation computer keeps giving me different readings every few minutes," Choi reported, wiping sweat from his forehead. "It's like space itself is changing around us." Captain Yoon studied the display screens that surrounded her command chair. The nebula clouds swirled in patterns that seemed almost alive, reaching toward their ships with tendrils of glowing gas. She had commanded vessels through asteroid fields and solar storms, but this felt different. This felt like the nebula was aware of their presence. Dr. Song Hee-jin worked in the science laboratory, her eyes focused on the microscope as she examined samples they had collected from debris fields along their route. The wreckage was unlike anything in the databases. Some pieces looked like standard human technology from centuries past, but other fragments defied explanation entirely. Under the microscope, she could see where human metal had somehow fused with materials that did not exist in any periodic table. The joining was perfect, as if the 2 substances had grown together rather than been welded or bonded. Even stranger were the organic samples embedded within the wreckage. "These DNA sequences are definitely human," she muttered to herself, adjusting the scanner settings. "But look at these protein structures, these cellular modifications. This is impossible." The genetic material showed adaptations that should have taken thousands of years of evolution to develop. Enhanced muscle fiber density, modified nerve pathways, sensory organs that could process wavelengths of light that human eyes had never been designed to see. Whatever had happened to create these samples, it had changed human biology in ways that science could not explain. As the days passed and they traveled deeper into the nebula, the crew began experiencing strange effects. It started with the night shift reporting unusual dreams. The same images appeared to multiple crew members, vast caverns filled with pulsing light, voices calling from impossible distances, and a presence that watched from the darkness between stars. Tensine Park Min-soo was the first to report hearing voices while awake. During his shift monitoring the communication arrays, he claimed to hear whispers in languages that sounded ancient and alien. The words made no sense, but they filled him with a deep sense of dread that he could not shake. Soon, other crew members reported similar experiences. Engineer Ko Ji-won heard the voices while working in the engine compartments. Medical technician Lim Young-ah heard them in the quiet corridors. During sleep periods, always the same incomprehensible whispers, always carrying the same feeling of overwhelming fear. Captain Yoon ordered increased medical monitoring for the entire crew. Dr. Lim Soo-ho, the chief medical officer, ran every test he could think of. Brain scans, blood work, psychological evaluations, exposure to radiation, contamination checks. Everything came back normal. According to every instrument he had, the crew was in perfect health. "There's nothing wrong with them physically," Dr. Lim reported to the captain in her private ready room. "But something is definitely affecting their minds. The stress levels are elevated across the board, and sleep patterns are becoming increasingly disrupted." The captain herself had begun experiencing the dreams, images of a world covered in twisted vegetation, structures that seemed to breathe, and eyes that watched from every shadow. She kept these experiences to herself, knowing that the crew needed her to remain strong and focused. On the 7th day of their journey through the nebula, the sensors finally detected their destination. Navigation Officer Choi called out excitedly as the target system appeared on the long-range scanners. A single star with several planets, exactly matching the coordinates from the ancient warning signal. But as they approached the system, the sensor readings became even more confusing. The third planet from the star should have been a dead rock according to their initial scans. The atmosphere was thin, the surface temperature was barely above freezing, and there was no indication of liquid water. Yet the biological sensors told a completely different story. Life signs covered the planet's surface. Not just simple microorganisms, but complex biological signatures that registered in the millions. The computer system struggled to classify what they were detecting. Some readings appeared almost human, while others showed no match to any known form of life. Dr. Song stared at the incoming data with growing amazement and fear. "Captain, these biosignatures are showing impossible diversity. It's like evolution has been accelerated by thousands of years. And some of these readings, they're definitely showing human genetic markers." The Determination and its escort ships took up orbit around the mysterious planet. Through the observation windows, the crew could see a world that defied explanation. The surface was covered in vegetation that moved without wind, structures that seemed to pulse with their own light, and patterns that suggested intelligence behind their design. Captain Yoon stood on the bridge, looking down at the planet that had been calling to them across 2 centuries of space and time. Whatever waited on that world had been patient enough to send a warning, desperate enough to try to save them, and powerful enough to change the very nature of human life itself. The shuttlecraft descended through the strange atmosphere of the planet they had named New Eden. Commander Jang Minwoo gripped his seat as the small vessel shook and rattled through layers of clouds that seemed to reach toward them with grasping fingers. Through the windows he could see the surface growing larger below them, covered in vegetation that moved in ways that plant life should never move. The landing was rough, with the shuttle bouncing twice before settling on what appeared to be solid ground. As the engines powered down, Commander Jang checked his equipment one final time. His team consisted of 6 specialists, including Dr. Song Hye-jin and Security Officer Kim Dae-ho. They wore full environmental suits, not knowing what dangers the planet's atmosphere might contain. The airlock hissed open and they stepped onto the surface of New Eden for the first time. The ground beneath their feet felt soft and spongy, as if they were walking on living tissue rather than soil. Around them, twisted trees stretched toward the sky, their branches moving slowly despite the absence of any wind. The vegetation was a dark purple color, with veins of silver running through leaves and bark like a circulatory system. "This is not natural plant growth," Dr. Song whispered into her communication device as she took readings with her scanner. "The cellular structure is too complex. It's like these plants have nervous systems." As they moved away from the landing site, the team noticed that the vegetation seemed to be watching them. Branches turned to follow their movement, and flowers opened and closed as they passed by. The feeling of being observed was overwhelming, as if every plant and tree was a pair of eyes focused on their presence. After walking for nearly an hour, they found the remains of what had once been a human settlement. Emerging from the alien, vegetation like bones from a grave, metal structures bore the markings of Earth technology from centuries past. Commander Jang ran his gloved hand along a section of hull plating and felt his heart race as he read the faded letters. Pioneer's Hope. "My God," he breathed. This is one of the lost colony ships from the first expansion wave. The Pioneers' Hope had launched from Earth in 2157, carrying 10,000 colonists to establish humanity's first permanent settlement beyond the solar system. The ship had vanished without a trace, becoming one of the great mysteries of human space exploration. Now its broken hull lay half-buried in alien soil, covered by vegetation that had grown through its corridors and chambers. As they explored the wreckage, Commander Jang heard voices calling from somewhere ahead. Human voices, speaking in accented English that sounded old-fashioned compared to modern speech patterns. He signaled for his team to follow as they made their way toward the sound. They found the survivors in what had once been the ship's main assembly hall. The roof had long since collapsed, replaced by a canopy of intertwined branches that filtered the strange light of New Eden's sun. Approximately 50 people sat in a circle, all wearing clothes made from materials that looked both organic and artificial. The survivors appeared human at first glance, but something was wrong with the way they moved. Their gestures were too fluid, too graceful, as if they were dancing rather than simply walking or reaching for objects. When they turned to look at the landing party, their eyes reflected the dim light like the eyes of nocturnal animals. A tall man rose from the group and approached them with smooth, silent steps. His face looked young, perhaps 30 years old, but his eyes held the weight of someone who had lived much longer. When he smiled, his teeth were perfectly white and sharp. "Welcome to New Eden," he said in that same old-fashioned accent. "I am Captain Kang Hyun-soo of the Pioneers' Hope. We have been waiting for you to arrive." Commander Jung felt confusion wash over him. According to the ship's records, Captain Kang should have been dead for decades, even if he had somehow survived the initial crash. Yet here he stood, looking barely older than a young officer fresh from the academy. Dr. Song immediately began scanning the colonists with her medical equipment. The readings she received made no sense according to everything she knew about human biology. Their heart rates were unusually slow, their body temperatures several degrees lower than normal, and their brain activity showed patterns she had never seen before. "How is this possible?" she whispered to Commander Jang. "These people should not be alive." As if he had heard her question, Captain Kang smiled wider. "The planet has been good to us," he explained. "When we crashed here, we thought we would all die. But New Eden welcomed us. It offered us gifts that we never imagined possible. To demonstrate, one of the colonists held out his hand and allowed Dr. Song to make a small cut with her medical scanner. The wound healed completely within seconds, leaving no trace that it had ever existed. Another colonist closed her eyes and seemed to communicate silently with her companions, their faces changing expression at exactly the same moment. Most disturbing of all was what happened when Captain Kang gestured toward the surrounding vegetation. The twisted plants responded to his movements, branches bending toward him like loyal pets seeking attention. In the distance, creatures that looked like a mixture of animal and plant moved through the undergrowth, clearly responding to commands that were never spoken aloud. "We have become more than human," Captain Kang continued. But Dr. Song noticed something strange in his voice. Behind the pride and confidence, she detected something else entirely. Fear, desperation, a plea for help that contradicted everything. He was saying about their wonderful new life. "The planet has given us abilities beyond our wildest dreams," he said, but his eyes seemed to be trying to communicate a completely different message. "We have evolved. We have become perfect." Dr. Song looked at Commander Jang and saw her own concerns reflected in his expression. These survivors were clearly no longer entirely human, and whatever had changed them was still present on this world. The sun of New Eden was setting, casting long shadows across the twisted landscape when Captain Kang suddenly stopped speaking mid-sentence. His perfect smile faded, and for a moment his eyes looked completely human again. The other colonists around him seemed frozen, as if someone had pressed a pause button on their movements. "Please," Captain Kang whispered, his voice breaking with emotion that had been absent moments before. "You have to listen to me. I don't have much time before it takes control again." Commander Jang stepped closer, recognizing the desperation in the man's voice. This was not the confident leader who had welcomed them to New Eden. This was someone who had been trapped and tortured for longer than any human should have to endure. "We didn't crash here," Captain Kang continued, his words coming out in a rushed whisper. "We were brought here. Something called to us from deep space made us change course. Our navigation system started showing readings that weren't real. We thought we were following distress signals from other ships, but there were no other ships." Dr. Song moved her scanner closer to Captain Kang, watching as his vital signs fluctuated wildly. His brain patterns showed two distinct sets of activity, as if two different minds were fighting for control of the same body. "The thing that lives in the center of this planet," Captain Kang gasped. "It feeds on our thoughts, our memories, our consciousness. It keeps us alive because dead minds have no value to it. We have been its prisoners for 200 years, watching through our own eyes as it uses our bodies." The other colonists began to stir, their movements becoming more natural as whatever controlled them seemed to lose its grip temporarily. Several of them looked at the landing party with expressions of pure terror and relief. "It learns from us," an elderly woman said, tears streaming down her face. "Every memory we have, every piece of knowledge about Earth, about human technology, about our weaknesses. It absorbs everything and uses it to plan." Commander Zhang felt his blood turn cold. Plan for what? Captain Kang's face contorted with pain as he fought to maintain control. Invasion. It has been preparing for decades, learning how to defeat humanity by studying us. It knows our military tactics, our technology, our psychology. It understands how we think and how we can be defeated. Dr. Song's scanner detected massive energy readings coming from deep beneath the planet's surface. Something enormous was moving in the planetary core, something that registered as both alive and completely alien to any form of life in her databases. "The enhancements you see in us," Captain Kang continued, his voice growing weaker, "they are not gifts. They are parasites that the entity creates to control us. They live in our nervous systems, allowing the creature to puppet our bodies while keeping our minds aware of everything that happens." A younger colonist, a man who looked to be in his 20s but whose eyes held centuries of suffering, spoke up. "We sent the warning signal during a solar storm. The electromagnetic interference weakened its control for a few hours. Several of us worked together to override the communication systems and transmit the message. That was our last moment of true freedom," Captain Kang added. "Our final act as human beings before it learned to prevent such resistance." Commander Zhang realized the horrible truth of their situation. These people had been conscious prisoners in their own bodies for 2 centuries, forced to watch as an alien intelligence used them as sources of information and as bait to lure more humans to their doom. "Why are you able to speak freely now?" Dr. Song asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Because it wants you to know," Captain Kang replied with bitter understanding. "It has learned everything it can from us. Now it wants to study your reactions, your responses to this knowledge. You are the next phase of its research." The vegetation around them began to move more aggressively, branches reaching toward the landing party like grasping hands. In the distance, creatures that were neither plant nor animal emerged from the undergrowth, moving with predatory purpose. "There is one thing it doesn't know," Captain Kang whispered urgently. "We found a way to destroy it, but the method requires sacrifice. The planet's core contains unstable materials that can be triggered to explode. We have spent decades secretly preparing the means to do this." "Why haven't you used it?" Commander Zhang asked. "Because it would kill everyone on the surface," and the elderly woman answered. "All of us colonists would die, and anyone else who happened to be here." Captain Kang's eyes began to glow with the same unnatural light as the other colonists. The moment of freedom was ending, and the entity was reasserting its control. "The device is hidden in the old reactor chamber of our ship. If you can reach it, if you can activate it, you can prevent this thing from spreading to the rest of human space. But you have to decide quickly," he added as his voice began to change back to the confident tone they had heard earlier. "It has learned enough from us. Soon it will be ready to leave this world and seek new victims among the stars." The other colonists were returning to their previous state, their movements becoming unnaturally graceful again, their eyes reflecting the strange light of New Eden. The brief window of human resistance was closing. Dr. Song grabbed Commander Jang's arm. "We need to get back to the shuttle and warn the ship," she said urgently. But as they looked around, they realized that the twisted vegetation had grown to block their path back to the landing site. The entity had been listening to everything, and it had no intention of letting them leave New Eden alive. The twisted plants of New Eden began closing in around the landing party like living walls. Commander Jang spoke urgently into his communication device, trying to reach Captain Yoon aboard the Determination. The signal was weak and filled with static, but he managed to relay the terrible truth about the colonists and the entity that controlled them. "Captain, you need to evacuate the fleet immediately," he transmitted. "This entire planet is a trap. The entity down here has been studying humanity for 2 centuries, and it's planning to spread to other worlds." Captain Yoon's voice crackled back through the interference. "What about your team, Commander? We're not leaving you behind." Before Commander Jang could respond, the colonists around them began to change. Their previously graceful movements became violent and predatory. Captain Kang's eyes blazed with alien light as he moved toward the landing party with inhuman speed. "It knows we discovered its plan," Dr. Song shouted over the growing noise of approaching creatures. "It's taking complete control of them." The colonists attacked with strength and coordination that no human should possess. They moved as one mind, controlling many bodies, anticipating the landing party's every action before it happened. Security Officer Kim Dae-ho fired his weapon at the advancing figures, but they seemed to absorb the energy blasts without showing any sign of pain or injury. In the chaos of the battle, Captain Kang suddenly stopped attacking. His face twisted, with tremendous effort as he fought against the alien presence in his mind. For just a moment, his humanity broke through the entity's control. "The reactor chamber," he gasped, pointing toward the wreckage of the Pioneer's Hope. "The device is there. I can activate it, but you have to get your people off this planet now." Commander Jang grabbed his communication device again. "Captain Yoon, prepare for immediate evacuation. We're coming up now, but something terrible is about to happen down here." Captain Kang stumbled toward the crashed ship, his body jerking and twitching as 2 different minds fought for control. The other colonists tried to stop him, but their movements became confused and uncoordinated as the entity struggled to maintain its grip on all of them simultaneously. Above them in orbit, Captain Yoon faced the most difficult decision of her career. She could order the shuttle to extract the landing party immediately, but that might give the entity time to escape the planet and threaten other human worlds. Or she could trust that Commander Jang's team would find a way to destroy the creature, knowing that they would probably die in the process. The choice was made for her when the planet's surface began to tremble. Deep beneath New Eden, something enormous was stirring in the planetary core. The entity had realized that its secret was discovered, and it was preparing to abandon its current home to seek new victims among the stars. Captain Kang reached the reactor chamber of the old colony ship, his hands shaking as he entered codes into a device that the colonists had built in secret over 2 centuries of hidden resistance. The machine was crude but effective, designed to create a chain reaction in the unstable materials that formed New Eden's core. "Tell Earth," he whispered into his own communication device as his fingers worked frantically at the controls. "Tell them about the signs to watch for. When navigation systems show false readings, when ships are drawn to places they never intended to go, when people start having the same dreams. That's how it calls to new victims." The device activated with a deep humming sound that seemed to come from the planet itself. Captain Kang's body convulsed as the entity tried to regain control, but it was too late. The chain reaction had begun, and nothing could stop it now. The sound that filled everyone's minds was unlike anything any human had ever experienced. It was the scream of an ancient intelligence facing its own destruction, a cry of rage and hunger that transcended normal hearing. The colonists fell to their knees, finally free from the entity's control in their last moments of life. Commander Jang and his team ran toward their shuttle as the ground began to crack beneath their feet. The vegetation around them withered and died as the entity's influence weakened. They reached their small craft, just as massive fissures opened across the planet's surface, The Determination's engines roared to full power as Captain Yoon ordered emergency departure from New Eden's orbit. Through the observation windows, the crew watched as the planet began to tear itself apart from the inside. Massive explosions erupted from the surface as the chain reaction spread through the planetary core. Captain Kang's final transmission reached the ship just as New Eden exploded in nuclear fire. His voice was calm and human again, no longer influenced by the alien presence that had controlled him for so long. The entity had others of its kind, he reported. It was in contact with similar creatures across the galaxy. Our expansion into space has awakened things that have been sleeping for millions of years. They're coming and they know everything about us now. The explosion that consumed New Eden was visible from several light years away. The ancient evil that had dwelt in the planet's core was finally destroyed, along with the human colonists who had sacrificed everything to prevent its escape. As the Determination and its escort ships began their journey back to human space, the crew carried with them both the warning and the knowledge that would be needed for the war that was coming. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, other ancient intelligences had felt their brother's death and were now turning their attention toward the expanding human civilization. Admiral Kim received their report and immediately began mobilizing the entire human fleet. The real battle for humanity's survival was about to begin,